Bighorn. The longest version.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
203, yeah. I think was what?
for his 50th birthday.
Director, Madam Secretary, I see it's 8 o'clock. I believe the treasurer will be joining us, but for the record, I will note that we have Secretary Gray on Zoom, and we have obviously the auditor and superintendent here.
Yep. Good morning.
I don't know if we have any members of our legislature on or in the room. I don't see any of our liaisons with us. We do have
here, Mr. Governor.
Representative Abby Angelos, and maybe you ought to go ahead and do a roll call.
Mr. Chairman, Suzanne Norton, Secretary of the State Building Commission. Superintendent Megan Deckenfelder. Treasurer Meyer.
Excused for the time being. He's on his way. Very good.
Auditor Racinas. Here. Secretary Gray.
I am here.
I
see
see
you.
him. You're on. It doesn't look like you're on mute, but we can't hear you, Secretary. I did see you acknowledge.
Yeah.
I'll also note that the treasurer has entered the room.
Treasurer Meyer here. Chairman Gordon here.
Here.
Senator Driscoll. Senator Landon. Representative Angelos here. Here. Representative Nicholas.
Excuse.
Excuse
So
me.
I note that Representative Angelos also acknowledged. I don't know if we have a trouble with our sound. I don't know. Representative, could you speak again to see if we can hear you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am here. Can you hear me?
No, we're not able to hear you. We are testing on this end. Secretary Gray, could you speak one?
1 2 1 2 1
Okay,
2 1
no.
2.
We're checking on this end. We can't hear you either.
So if we can't resolve this, we'll look in the chat box.
Okay.
If that works for you. Thank you. Please proceed.
We have a very simple agenda this morning, and we're looking to approve just discussion of SBC emergency rules to allow firearms in public buildings related to 2025 House Enrolled Act 24. We approve the agenda. We will move on.
Members, you've had a chance to see the agenda for the special meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved by the superintendent. Is there support?
Second.
And seconded by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So I see Secretary Gray said aye. So we have the agenda. Please
Okay.
proceed.
All right, item 2 on page 3 of your packet. We, at our last meeting in May, proceeded to move forward with the process to adopt rules to conform chapters 1 and 4 to the law, which becomes effective July 1st. We are on track to close public comment for that regular rule process on June 30th. And then we anticipate, considering any comments that we receive at our June 9th meeting. So far, there have been 0 comments left in response to the public meeting or to the proposed rule change.
Madam Secretary, I understand we may have somebody here who wants to address the board on this issue. So
Okay.
we'll go, please proceed, and then I'll see if there is anyone here.
Okay. With that, When the rules become effective on July 1st, our current rules will not conform to law. And therefore, we're here to consider today if we would like to adopt emergency rules. And that process is on page 4.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, so my understanding is that these are the exact same rules that are out for the regular rulemaking process.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Superintendent, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks. Members of the board, if it is appropriate, I would entertain comment at this point. I get a general nod of yes. Please, if anyone would like to address, please, now's a good time. Come on up if you would, and you can come. There's looks like a guy shouting, and if you press that button, your microphone should turn red. It's the right button of the two in the center of the console. Yep, please. And then if you could identify yourself.
Sure. My name is Constant Mark Hare. I'm a grateful 29-year resident of Cheyenne. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I have reviewed the proposed commission rules pertaining to firearms, and I have also reviewed House Enrolled Act 24/2025. I respectfully oppose the proposed rule because I believe that they conflict impermissibly with the provisions of the statutes created and amended pursuant to Enrolled Act 24/2025. As I understand the rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm also very happy that there are some legislators here because they can shut me down too if they think I'm wrong, okay? The way I read the proposed rules, Chapter 4, Section 5, Romanet 2, provides generally that no dangerous weapon may be carried in public-owned buildings except those lawfully carried by police officers and security personnel, and also individuals lawfully engaged in permitted or constitutional carry in public areas. Is that a correct statement? Okay. Then you have to look to the definition section. The definition section defines public areas. That's in Chapter 1, Section 4GG, and it means areas of public buildings that are ordinarily open to the public or designated by the occupant agency as open to the public, and provides examples of lobbies, courtyards, auditoriums, and meeting rooms. So what this rule is attempting to do is create a distinction between public areas and, I guess, private or non-public areas, which I would imagine would be stuff like offices, things like that, where you just don't generally let the public go, but where people are authorized to be, right? Employees, invitees, the DoorDash person you let through the door, that kind of stuff. They're authorized to be there, right? Now, when I go to Enrolled Act 24, it creates a new statute, which is Wyoming Statute 68105, and it also makes some amendments to the concealed carry statute to eliminate some things where you previously could not carry, but now will be authorized to carry. As I read, let's see, Wyoming Statute 68105, subsection A calls it the Wyoming Repeal Gun-Free Zones Act. That's what the legislature called it. When you go to section B, which is one of the operative provisions of it, it provides that persons, okay, very broad, lawfully carrying concealed weapons in Wyoming under Wyoming Statute 68104A, that's the regular concealed carry statute, may carry a concealed weapon in the following places. When you go to Romanet 4, it says any public building not otherwise prohibited under Wyoming Statute 68104, the concealed carry statute. So it basically says any person authorized to carry can carry in any public building. I see no distinction here between public areas and private areas. Do you want?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Madam Secretary.
So you are correct, but the other definition, and correct me if I'm wrong, working group members, our intent there was to also have you check the constitutional carry, which is item K on page 1-2 of the rules.
Okay.
And so at this point, the distinction between public area is that when the current adopted rules went into effect in March, it's now allowed to carry
I
in
understand.
whatever way in public areas
Correct,
before the law goes into effect.
correct. But under,
And
oh, sorry.
we also defined constitutional carry, which in these rules, which then is where it's allowed in public buildings,
Anywhere.
anywhere.
So in employee offices and things like that?
According to the law and according to the SBC rules, there are personnel rules under review and so on about how that's handled in office spaces, but that is not the purview of this board.
But as
And
I
these
understand the
rules-
rule in chapter 4, section 5, Romanet 2. I gotta find it. It basically says, except as otherwise provided herein and subject to the restrictions set forth in section 5.1 of this chapter, no dangerous weapon may be carried in public-owned buildings except those lawfully carried by peace officers, including security personnel. And Romanet 2, individuals lawfully engaging in permitted carry or constitutional carry in public areas in compliance with all other applicable laws and regulations. It says public areas. So, and then you got a definition of public areas. So unless that provision gets gutted by something else you can cite me to, there's a prohibition, basically.
Yeah, I appreciate the point you're making. Thank you, Madam Auditor. It looked like you were about to.
Mr. Chairman, I do think, Secretary Norton's indication that in these rules, we can't, SBC doesn't have control over employee behavior, so we're trying to hit what we do manage. I guess a question, or the way I had been looking at it, the definition of public area, because I think you make a good point, but it does say ordinarily open to the public or designated by the occupant agency as open to members of the public. So the way I interpret that is someone coming in off the street can enter our lobby, et cetera.
Correct.
In general, someone coming off the street cannot barge through reception and back into
Yeah, they're not
someone's
authorized.
office. However, if you were to stop by my office and I invite you back to my office for a meeting, I'm designating that as defined here because I have designated that as a public space by inviting you in for that purpose. And I think particularly where it says like meeting rooms, I'm not sure how everybody else operates, but in my office, we have like 3 small meeting rooms. None of those I would consider open to the public in general.
Correct.
However, I often have members of the public that come in for meetings. So that, I guess my point is I totally understand your point. I'm not sure there's an issue because I do think that designation by the occupant areas, anytime you invite the Jimmy John's guy in to that sort of then becomes, you said this is public for the duration.
Authorized into
Yeah,
a non-public
yes.
area. I don't think it makes it a public area. I mean, we have legislators watching this, right? So they can weigh in, but, and the other thing is what you're saying is then it's up to the discretion of the agency that's involved. It's up to you as to what you let somebody in. This doesn't literally, I don't think, let anybody in this room whose building is controlled by these regulations can carry a firearm in their own building beyond the hallways is kind of the way I read it, literally. And it seemed to me the legislative intent is pretty clear because it talks about employees in the statute and limitations you can place on, but.
Yeah, and actually, what I really appreciate you bringing, that's the reason why we have public comment. Because I think you've pointed out something that we should give some care and consideration to as to whether it meets the intent of the statute or not. And I think that's exactly what public comment is about. So I really appreciate you bringing that.
Sure. There might have been a couple of other little
Sure.
minor points I wanted to
Sure.
make. Well, I was going to talk about employees, but the legislative act is clear that it allows some restrictions to be placed on employees, but it really limits those very much. So I do think that these rules somebody should take a look at these rules. I actually wrote my state senator, but it's only been a few days ago and I never heard back because I was trying to get some legislative input as to what the intent was. Because if I come in here and tells you what the intent is and legislators get here and say, no, that's not what we meant. Well, okay, I get it. But, okay, so I'll sit down and shut up.
No. Please.
Well,
proceed.
I'm gonna tell you what, and I didn't write this stuff and I don't necessarily agree with the public policy of getting police involved in intergovernmental squabbles. But I mean, there's a section in here that says anybody who does anything to prevent somebody from carrying where they can carry is guilty of a 1-year misdemeanor.
Mhm.
Okay. Like I said, I didn't write it. I don't agree that that should be actually in the law. There's other ways of dealing with these things, but it's there. Okay. And it kind of applies to you guys. All right. I mean, you vote for this. It's, but anyway.
No, I appreciate that. And just to be clear, the law was passed, and it sort of passed over the top. And but the legislative intent was pretty clear. And we're trying to respond to it with the rules so that
Sure.
people have an understanding. And I
And I'll submit written
again,
comments too.
please.
And so I appreciate your time. Take care.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, do I turn this button off?
Sure.
Yeah,
And I just
hold
wanna,
on.
again,
So I have
thank
a
you very
question.
much for coming. Thank
All
you for making some very cogent points.
I have a
Thank you for hearing
question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, Mr. Secretary, did you have a comment? I don't know if we can hear you yet, but I have a question.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can ask
We
it.
can hear you now.
Okay. Well, is he still here?
He is, yeah.
Can we ask him to re-synopsize this? Because I'm not sure I'm totally tracking all of his points. I agree with him that it's a little bit confusingly written. I mean, honestly, I think we should have done what the treasurer did, and I still think, and just cite the statute, because this is just kind of becoming a mess. But if we could ask him to restate the central thrust of his point, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. The central thrust of my point is that the new legislation basically allows persons lawfully authorized to carry firearms are authorized to carry in any public building unless not authorized by law. And this commission does have the authority to adopt some regulations dealing with things like healthcare facilities, places with volatile materials. And then the actual concealed carry permit also has those other places where you can't go, jails, prisons, police stations, bars, stuff like that. But it's really limited. It's not this broad where I think you can do what you're doing. The proposed rules, they basically prohibit anyone from carrying any place except public areas, which are defined to be places just generally open to the public, which is hallways, corridors, and things like that. Not like in offices or not in places where, people are invited to go. And I totally get Auditor Racinus's point that some places are not authorized. They're not authorized. You've got secure card access to a lot of places. And, we had those First Amendment warriors that were coming around in government buildings a few years ago, really pushing the envelope and stuff like that. I'm not talking about people like that. I'm talking about people that are authorized. People that are authorized to be there should be allowed. Excuse me, the way I literally read that, those people cannot carry. And that includes government employees and their invitees who otherwise meet all the requirements. I'll be glad to, I can write something up.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent, and just let me say, I think the meat of your comments are really pertinent, but we do need to, if you can write them out, that'll give us an opportunity to digest them.
Yeah,
So,
do I do that as just the public comment thing, or do I submit them to particular people or anything like that?
yeah, we can get all of that to you here, and we go to the secretary, but we'll get that information.
That's fine, and I'll stand by and
Yep.
get that information later or.
Madam Superintendent.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think I agree with the statements being made, but I think that's what's included in the language. And so I don't know if our attorney would maybe speak to that because I think there's a disconnect here.
I missed the question. Was it directed at me?
Uh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, she was asking if we had an attorney who could weigh in on this. And I'm just mindful of the fact this is public comment and that therefore, you know, in the fullness of time, it's good to be able to consider the depth of the comment. I think Secretary Gray, you were about to say something, then I have the auditor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm want to hear from the attorneys because I do think it's a little bit convoluted and I think that might or might not be playing a role in some of this. But I mean, one solution could be to just delete public on the bottom of 4.2 and put all areas. And I think that might fix it. And I was going to ask the gentleman whether he thought it would fix it and ask the attorneys. But, you know, I think what we should do is hear from the attorneys and then maybe the gentleman can digest that possible fix and then I'll ask the attorneys that. So I think that'd be a way to proceed.
Okay, auditor.
Just one question, and maybe I
Sure.
know the answer, but knowing that there are also personnel rules coming that will allow employees to carry. And again, that's everybody's intent, I think anyway. Does that alleviate your concerns, or do you still think do you feel that then we would just have two sets of rules that conflict with each other?
Off the top of my head, something that deals with employees just deals with employees. It doesn't deal with the person you invite in.
Okay.
And it might not be you or somebody with your level of authority. It just might be a staff person who meets with somebody or something like that. So you're still going to have to address that in some way. And I do believe that changing the definition, or just eliminating the public thing would probably take care of it. And I would also suggest that it had something like, lawfully authorized to be where you are. So you don't have to deal with those people just walking off the street, that kind of stuff. So, so I think a minor tweak could probably fix it. So.
Mr. Treasurer, and then if we have an attorney here, then. we can go send. Not sure how you can do a constitutional amendment or something to go right more important than something else.
Sure. I think there's a distinction there. I don't think you necessarily have to adopt as a matter of law the private property owners. I don't want guns in here because basically I don't want guns in here signs like a no shoes, no shirt, no service. It's waivable, right? And so I just don't even think the government should be involved in saying, well, if the rule of the landlord says that, let the landlord put up any sign the landlord wants to put up, and then it's a matter of trespass law. It's not a matter of criminal law. The trespass law is going to be, please leave. Okay.
Right.
Or take me to jail, whichever you prefer. So I just don't think the government needs to be mixed up in that.
Right. And we'll hear from the attorneys. I want to be mindful of the fact that we are not adopting rules today. We can't adopt those really for a bit, right? You want to just kind of go through that process a bit, Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, yes, absolutely. So the rules that are under consideration, the regular rules under consideration are these rules. And they were the next step from the rules that became effective in March. It's been very helpful to have that work done ahead of time rather than once the act became effective, because it really does help us wrap our minds around all the nuances that we may or may not catch, including the one that you've pointed out today. And so the public comment period is open for the regular rule process. And today we were here to consider these rules as a potential to consider adopting effective July 1st. And then they would become effective for a maximum of 120 days. The law required the SBC to begin rulemaking on July 1st. So we are ahead of schedule. The public comment period is what helps us see things we might have missed, looking at things through our own lenses. And today's potential motion is to approve, to modify, or to not approve emergency rules effective July 1st.
And the reason I'm,
Turn this off or?
no,
Okay.
please, if you could just stay there, 'cause I think
That's a pleasure.
you're helping tremendously. Devin is, or please
Tabitha?
come on up. And I'm sorry, Counselor, I can't remember your name. Thank you.
Okay.
Deb.
Sorry, Tabitha, so I'm with the Attorney General's office. To Secretary Gray's comment about amending the language, I do believe we could amend the language, although the suggested language would be, instead of all areas, using that defined term that we added in these rules of public-owned buildings. So instead of public areas, we could change that to public-owned buildings if we wanted to make a change there. That public areas, I believe, was part of the original draft before the bill passed this year. So I believe that language came from the language that we adopted late last year. So that one is up to the commission to determine how they would like to. But if we were to make a change, my suggestion there would be public-owned buildings consistent with the rest of the rule.
Thank you, Tabitha. So further comments,
Yeah, I've got one other question.
uh,
Or
Richard.
her.
Please.
Yeah,
please.
and just want to clarify a little bit earlier. So, what we're doing today, the questioner asked that it's adoption of emergency rules, which, because the public comment period on the regular rulemaking will not be completed in time for the enacting date of the law. This procedure is there for a couple different reasons, but one of them is to fill in the gap. And so the emergency rules can last for up to 120 days. If the regular rule is adopted in the intervening period, the practice in Wyoming state government is those regular rules supersede the emergency rules. But it's really about filling in the gap in the intervening period when the public comment period does not elapse, and the 60 days that are allowed after the adoption of the rule, it does not provide enough time for the rule to go into effect. But my question is for Tabitha. What do you think of saying all public areas in public-owned buildings, just to be super clear, rather than just in public-owned buildings? Or no, in all areas, sorry, in all areas in public-owned buildings, rather than in public areas in compliance, but you could say in all areas in public-owned buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I apologize. I'm just reviewing that and reading in the language that you have suggested, just to verify the impact that would have. It does have the all other applicable laws and regulations. There could be some potential confusion with the all areas just because there will be areas in public buildings where there will be restrictions on firearms, and that is based off of the existing law, which authorizes us to set some restrictions. I'm thinking certain areas in buildings may have high concentrations of volatile chemicals that we might be restricting those areas, or like the building up in Casper where there are specific areas in that facility where there are going to be extra restrictions because the facility has courtrooms, it has Department of Corrections facilities. Like that specific building has a lot of different restrictions. And so adding in that language, I don't know that it's necessary, as it might cause some confusion. However, I don't see that it would be violative of law, if that makes sense. I apologize for
No,
giving a very
Tabitha,
legal
that-
answer.
That is fine, and I appreciate that, and the reason I think the comment is so apropos and correct is because it does give us time to look at all the interconnections, and you've pointed out several different laws, and there are obviously others that are referenced here, and it's a little hard to know on the fly exactly how that all applies. I think the point that you made about the inconsistency between the law and these rules is one that we should take very seriously and consider. So,
Thank you. Punch out.
thanks. Madam Auditor, was there anything more you?
No.
And really, thank you very, very much. I know you took time out to come here, and really appreciate it.
I would rather have something discussed before something goes into effect than have to
Absolutely.
deal with something after. So that's why I'm here now.
And go ahead, I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say, thank you all very much for your time. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate it. And, I wanted to make the point that the regular rules are a ways out.
I know.
The emergency rules provide us an opportunity to cover the gap, as the secretary said, and I think we actually really do want to get this right. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tabitha, can you talk a little bit, when we talked as a working group, the intention over and over again has been make this as closely tied to the statute as possible. Do you feel like this definition of public area is not in fact doing that and needs to be clarified? Because it was my understanding that we were reaching that with this language.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. I'm reviewing the definition for the public areas real quick. And our definition of public area is fairly broad. And I can't think of an exact example, but I do believe it might be possible. And I'm not saying that this is a factual circumstance on the ground. It might be possible for an as applied for something to come up where the public area definition could make things confusing. Whereas the public owned building, I think, does help to clarify that. However, because our definition of public area is fairly broad, I believe it could be fine as is, or that public owned building would be an appropriate substitute language if we chose to substitute the language there.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Superintendent.
follow up. So being that public building is the subsequent definition, you would say just remove public area as a definition and just refer to public buildings?
I believe the public area is used elsewhere in the rules. So for the firearms rules, we can substitute the public-owned building for public area in that part 4, I believe it is.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam
Or part
Superintendent.
5, I apologize.
well, and my only issue there is then public building includes those leased. And so then are we,
Public-owned building, I apologize. I
okay, public
misspoke.
owned, no, I might have as well. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Treasurer, yeah, please, I think your microphone may not be seated properly. Your light's on, but not the top light. Yeah, this light.
This, there we go.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the question I was reading through this. It seems like we have to have concurrence by the management council and judicial council. Does that mean that the rest of the state buildings, unless there's concurrence by those two entities, we've got a roadblock, or how does that work? I'm just wondering why the necessary concurrence between judiciary and the management council.
I think that's statutory.
Was that in the statute?
Mr. Chairman.
That was.
So, Mr. Treasurer, yes, it's statutory.
And-
That the
and so what
State Building
happens
Commission
if
does not
If
have.
the judicial council doesn't concur, what's that? What's the aspect of that, I guess? I'm just trying to, it seemed problematic.
Sorry, I'll, there's just not enough mics in the right spot. As to that point, so what the statute, about in reference to the Judicial Council, Management Council, is that for legislative spaces or legislative buildings or judicial buildings or judicial spaces, they need to concur.
Separately.
Yes, in order for the rules, in order for SBC's rules to apply to their spaces, they need to concur. If they do, then they apply. If they don't concur, then they manage them however they want to, I suppose. That's on them. But if they want your rules to apply, then they need to concur.
And Devin.
That's not the way it's written. The way it seems like it's written to me, it doesn't say to the extent the legislative management council, at least separately and apart from the judicial council, it seems like both of them have to concur there.
Mr. Treasurer, if I,
Yeah,
Mr. Treasurer,
okay.
if I may, Devin, I think there may be some confusion with the overlap with the whatever the Capitol Square legislation is, which requires the concurrence of the management council. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman Governor.
Square, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely just makes it more complicated, but already just in statute prior to them, doing that, there's just a provision that, SBC, the way the statute's written, SBC manages it. It sounds like all public buildings, but then of course there are some agencies that have their little carve outs.
Yeah.
And then in recognition of the fact that there are 3, co-equal branches of government, there's also specific carve outs for the judicial branch and the legislative branch. And I don't think at the time, I mean, it had nothing to do with firearms. It's just the fact that as far as managing those spaces, those entities can do it themselves, or they can opt in. There's the ability to opt into your rules if they want. I don't think at the time anybody was contemplating things getting so complicated. And I think part of it is a product of the fact that those statutes I don't know if they need to be amended or whatever. I think they're probably generally fine, but nobody at the time was thinking things would get to the level they are now. And they probably don't entirely.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that,
Yeah.
that the failure for somebody to concur wouldn't affect the others in the way it's written. I guess it's like, they can take it or leave it. And it sounds like in these areas, if there's not a concurrence by the judiciary or the management council in their areas, that the statute doesn't apply to them?
Our rules, the SBC's rules don't apply to those spaces unless they concur.
Okay, but then do they have rulemaking authority to do it themselves?
I mean, that's sort of on them. I don't know that they specifically do, although the legislature, I don't know about judicial council, when we were first drafting these, and this is just somewhat historical knowledge, nothing to do with the firearms, we're just drafting the SPC rules. We're talking to, judicial branch folks, and they're like,
But it's not expressed necessarily in this legislature, I mean, in the statute that says.
yes,
that
it's
the
definitely not
judiciary
in,
has rulemaking authority for this section, and the legislature has rulemaking authority for. So I just didn't know where they have general rulemaking authority, carte blanche, because some agencies do, some agencies don't.
Chairman, Governor, Treasurer, my general understanding is that their authority to do those sort of falls within their broad, I mean, I don't, it's definitely not in that statute. That statute does not discuss anything about what authority they have. It just has the specific carve out that says they can concur. I think at least in like the judiciaries, as an example, it falls within their general authority to manage courts, that they get to, manage what happens in the courtroom. They can do the same thing with respect to this. I think that my guess is the reason that carve out is there is so that it can be less complicated. If they want to opt in, our rules are probably considerably more extensive than the rules they might make and go into topics they may not consider. And so if they were to, like, maybe, they think our rules are good or some aspects of them are good, they can simply concur and it's much less complicated, but they don't have to do so.
Okay. Well, thanks for the update. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman.
Treasurer. Madam Superintendent, Madam Auditor, were you queued up?
I'm good.
Okay, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so Tabitha, going back to what we were discussing, okay, I'm looking in section 5, F. And so here we do state, except as otherwise provided herein and subject to the restrictions set forth in blah, 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 no dangerous weapon may be carried in, we do say here, public owned buildings, except those lawfully carried by. Okay, go down to individuals lawfully engaging in permitted carry or constitutional carry in public areas in compliance. If we just removed from little ii in public areas, that would still be underneath the section that includes public owned buildings, correct? So we could just remove the words in public areas.
Madam Superintendent, yes, that would also be an acceptable alteration to the rules. And if we wanted to, if we were looking to adopt the emergency rules today, we could change this for the emergency rules that would go into effect July 1, and then address it in the permanent rules going forward in whatever way the commission deems appropriate.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Well,
Would
Go ahead.
you want to?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I would move that in section 5, subsection F, Romanet 2, remove the words in public areas.
Second.
It's been moved, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
29. Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say, I think I like this solution. I think it's the least confusing of the
426
confusing
also.
solutions. And then I think it also, once HR rules come in to manage employees, I think it's also the least likely to conflict with anything those say. And again, that area, the Romanet 2 says in compliance with all other applicable laws and regulations. And of course, that means somebody doesn't get to barge into your private area just because they have a gun, right? They still have to, they still have to respect which areas are public and not generally public unless they're invited or authorized to be there. And so I think that cleans it up in the, like I said, the least confusing way to go ahead and make sure we have these in place July 1st.
I guess clarification. So on page 29, at the bottom it's section 5, it's F, and you're just going to strike public.
No, down here, we strike.
Oh, in public areas there. Oh, Roman at
Because
2.
the-
Okay.
This already says public buildings.
All right.
All right, further discussion?
Question?
Are you calling the question or do you have a question?
No, I'm just, I have a question.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Certainly supportive of the intent of this. I do think, though, we should probably put a motion on the table for the rule rather than just amending something that's not on the table, so. It's the parliamentary point.
Fair enough. So you want to?
I would withdraw my second.
You'll withdraw, place the motion on.
Withdraw that amendment. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and would move the emergency rules with the following amendment. That section 5, subsection F,
You can amend it once you've had.
Romanet 2, strike in public areas.
Okay, so that motion's been made
Second.
with the changes. And so it's second now discussion. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Further discussion? Further discussion?
I support this. Glad we're fixing it. I think this has gotten a little bit convoluted and I think on the regular, maybe we look at just referring to the statute, but certainly supportive of this. And I think it fixes a lot of the issues there. I still think there's further clarity that could be provided as we move through the regular rulemaking process. So I'm going to be voting aye.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam Auditor.
could we just have a brief update? Would we expect to address those regular rules at our July meeting or?
Mr. Chairman, Auditor Racines, yes, we would be able to address them. I'm not sure we can make this change.
We will evaluate that with you between now and the next meeting.
Thank you, Tabitha. Yeah, I think it would make sense with the changes that are here, not to further confuse the process. So if there is a way for us to understand, kind of the dimensions of this change, and B, to actually start working on the rules that we will have. So that would be great.
Certain changes can be made to the rules provided they are within the scope. So we will take a look at that and.
Right. Thank you. Not being an attorney, I don't know if they're within the scope, but I would suggest they're pretty close.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, I just might add, I mean, and I'm so sorry, I forgot his last name, but Mr. X.
Montier?
Montier. I think with that reading of it, those original rules almost maybe illegally restrict something we didn't realize we were doing. So I would hope that. Anyway.
Yeah.
I would hope we could make that change without starting the whole process over, but
Yeah.
also not an attorney.
Yeah. Thank you. I would urge that we do our best. So thank you. Further comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think the public area was parsing out the control of the SBC and the Management Council and the Judicial Council. Public building would include those, wouldn't it? Or does it say to the extent they concurred? So you still have that parsing out in publicly owned building. So it exists in both places. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Treasurer, I think probably does. I think there are certain buildings that are complicated. They have judicial, they have other, health, other things that are part of the statute.
Yeah,
and
I
that's-
just wanted to make sure that we didn't have a broad every public building and forgot the parsing out
Yeah.
and reading into
Yeah.
that public
Yep.
owned, we do.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Further matters.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that with that motion passing for the rules, the emergency rules to become effective as modified July 1st, 2025. Our next business is on page 32 for adjournment.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.